All right, welcome back to Business Today. It is Friday, Nifurahi Day. And we continue with Week in Perspective. Our economist Ken Kishinga from Mentoria Economics is here with us to help us put things in perspective. Hopefully this year, the musicians will not be crying foul. You know, remember the day MCSK, little pay and whatnot. Let's hope 20 is a year of difference, yeah? But let's talk some geopolitics. The death of top Iranian commander Qasem Soleimani in a U.S. strike on Baghdad's international airport last week has escalated tension between the two states. The battle lines between these two nations is tipped to affect the global economy, leading to a market turbulence that is doing more harm than good. According to an article on the Financial Times, gold has increased by 2.6% compared to last year, while a barrel of oil costs $70. Kenya, which remains an ally of both nations when it comes to trade relations, is left in the middle of this turmoil. Tehran, which is Iran's capital, is one of the biggest markets for the Kenyan market. Despite the tension between the two states, Iran still remained constant in purchasing tea in the recent tea auction that happened in Mombasa in the course of the week. According to East Africa Tea Traders Association that manages the Mombasa auction, Iran showed interest amidst the tension, which resulted to the price of the beverage rallying by 5% on Tuesday to hit 225 shillings compared to 214 shillings in the previous auction in December 2019. Ken, Iran, US, so far, from your observation, how has this affected the global economy?
It's a very precarious time. People are seeing risk all over because this is a big deal. But from the information we have so far is neither side wants a fully blown war. Trump, when he ran for president in 2016, part of his campaign manifesto was to really remove the troops from the Middle East. Iran itself has a battered economy. It's not been doing very well because of all the sanctions. So it's in no country's interest for a war to take place. But both countries want to show that they are mighty and they are powerful. So I think that complexity is what is creating this current scenario. But I don't expect it to escalate beyond where it is right now.
When we look at the two countries, Iran buys a lot of tea from us. U.S. also very close ally, actually. We had a summit last year where with China on the continent, they also want a share of it from a different approach. We have seen them make intentional effort to boost trade between Africa and, the U.S. and even Kenya, to be specific. So starting with the other side, Iran and Kenya, the relations, trade relations, how are we expected to handle this going forward?
Well, I think it's been a very cordial relationship between Kenya and Iran. Obviously, Iran is one of the biggest tea markets for Kenya. And for the last 40 years, obviously in the 70s, there was a whole oil crisis, which caused a bit of a tiff. But the last 40 years, we've seen excellent relationship between Kenya and Iran. I would say the same between Kenya and the US. I think one of the strategic things Kenya has done on its foreign policy, it's really not to get involved in some of these geopolitical narratives. And you remember one of the big votes that took place at the UN about 2 years ago, Kenya abstained from that vote. So I think our foreign policy of non-interference, I think it's a good policy. Kenya is a small nation and it needs to do trade with all these competing powers, US and China, US and Iran. So I think I think that is the best way. And if we can maintain it in that trajectory, I think Kenya will continue to prosper.
Because the whole situation, just looking at it from outside, it forces people or countries or states to either side with the US or to side with Iran. It's creating some sort of duality, and normally that is quite dangerous. You say there's no full blow war. Nobody wants that at the end of the day. To de-escalate this situation moving forward, this is speaking from an economic perspective, as a Kenyan whose trade might be affected by this escalation. How can that be done cordially?
Well, I was talking to a tea farmer yesterday, and he was quite concerned that the tea exports to Iran might reduce because of the current geopolitical problems. I don't think it might go that far. I think Iran, where it is right now, as I said, its economy has been battered by sanctions, and they want to engage with the rest of the world, albeit they still want to have that superiority, and they need to balance both of them. So the missiles they sent to Iraq over the weekend, I think part of it was to please it was for domestic consumption, to show the people of Iran that Iran is still a country to be fitted in the world. But at the back of their mind, they know the economy is not doing well. What the ordinary Iranian wants is better homes, better roads, better hospitals, and not war. And the same thing is playing out. So I think from a Kenyan perspective, I think if Kenya can continue, because the US and Iran have no diplomatic relationship. So if Kenya and other countries can be the point of convergence where to show that these two countries can coexist, I think such roles can help that de-escalation that you're talking about.
Definitely. When you speak about war and recent wars that we've experienced and tensions, they always surround resource. Oil, to be specific, and some people say oil is a curse to some great extent. We look at the Middle East. Oil prices, are changing, are shifting with this tension. How? Explain to me how we're going to have a ripple effect now from the oil prices until personally I can feel it in Kenya. How is that? What's the process? Please just elaborate.
Well, a typical barrel of oil, from the time it gets from the ground, for example, in Saudi Arabia, to the point it gets to your car, it's traded about 44 times. So there are a lot of players in between, many of them investment banks, many of them hedge funds that take positions. So, for example, what we saw with the Saudi Arabia fields being destroyed a couple of months ago, what that does, it reduces the supply. Anytime the supply of oil or any supply side issue comes up, the prices naturally go up because the world is consuming a product that is less and less. So the prices go up. So that means the prices you'll pay at the fuel tank obviously will be much more. The reverse is true. Anytime you have a glut and you have an oversupply of oil, more than the demand, you'll see prices coming down. So there are people who are every time interested in sometimes causing supply side shocks. This could be through military strikes, through acts of terrorism, and they take positions because they know naturally when you constrain that supply side, prices will go up and they trade on that. So it's quite unfortunate that there are warmongers out there who actually are interested in creating sort of business out of war. But the vast majority of people around the table really want peace and prosperity on both sides. So the question is, how do we remove the 10% that are craving for war for commercial reasons and really return sort of like the global economy? Because the global economy has been slowing down for the last 4 years. The last thing we need is another war to take the global economy backwards. What we need is more peace and more prosperity.
Definitely. What we need is more peace and more prosperity. Now, as we close up this particular segment of Iran and US, just briefly, when things calm down, and it's just the beginning of the year, projecting, moving forward. What are your expectations in regards to geopolitical 2020? With Trump, things have been a little bit unpredictable. But speaking overall, because these affects businesses across the world, what are the expectations? Are there any potential the world can just be cool and we do business with each other?
Oh, I doubt that. It's going to be a very interesting year, as the Chinese say. Obviously, from the US side, Trump will be a big factor. His impeachment, whether it will happen or not, will be a big factor. His re-election, whether it will happen or not, will be a big factor. For Africa, for Kenya, which is part of Africa, the whole divide has been between the US and China. So it's very unclear the direction the US is going. But China is very committed to investing in Africa. Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, is visiting Africa. And Xi Jinping has visited Africa a number of times. So I think for a number of African countries, it's a matter of playing US and China and really seeing where you can get the most goodies. Because at the end of the day, it's really for the benefit of the African people. So I think the geopolitics will be anchored on US-China. Iran is a big player, but US and China is considered the bilateral relationship of our lifetime. Definitely. So we always have to look at how those two countries are posturing towards Africa and towards Kenya.
Okay, definitely. Ken, that was very, very insightful. 2020 is going to be an interesting year, trust you me.